Okay, we're here, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. It's good to be with you. Baruch atah
Adonai
Eloheinu
Olam
asher
Kedishanu, that's what
Vetzivanu
salt today, Torah.
Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Hi.
Hi.
Last night, Susie and I, together alone, had a very lovely evening. And I don't normally mention this because, you know, I don't give reports on services. Services last night, something happened. And I don't know what happened, but they were beautiful.
Yes,
They
they
were
were.
beautiful.
They were fabulous.
Yes.
They were beautiful. I talked with Don Gurney afterwards and Susan Nannis. They both felt it. No one understood what happened. They absolutely didn't know, but something, it was just like that. Something really beautiful. So I said to Susan, great, so we'll get this next week too. And of course she paled. It just, you know, it just was that way. Okay, now my first.
Rabbi, may I say, because I was there next to you and your beautiful wife, Risa, I think that when that last, the Braid Theater, when they told that story about the lady, the Holocaust survivor, that she came and stayed with her and she passed away, the angels were in the room. She was in the room. Everybody that was there that they were speaking about was in the room. That's what was going on. Their presence was there.
Okay, now, thank you. The first moment of checking in is to hope that you all will be able to stay for the Kaddish Yortzeit reading at the end. We will be reading the name of Miriam Sarachik at the end, and she was the mother of one of our regular students, and her funeral was just this past week. And Karen, I received a request for the name to be read, and I would be grateful if, I mean, we always have a minion, but if you would hang in there for that. I was just looking last night in the New York Times, and there was a full half-page obituary of Miriam Sarachik. She was a genius in the field of physics and was celebrated. Anyway, we will be memorializing her with one of our class members.
Rest in peace, Miriam.
Please be there with us and stay with us.
I
Okay,
just wanted to say,
checking in.
Rabbi Stan, thank you for acknowledging her. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Now, do we have any other checking in? What's going on in the world? What makes you happy? What makes you concerned? Effie.
Yeah, my sister, who had breast cancer and had a part of her breast removed about, I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago. The cancer came back and now she's under hospice care. So we're going.
El na Rafana Allah, may God bring healing to her. And you know, Effie, that we divide between healing and cure. And healing is much more spiritual, personal, but you have been going through hell in so many ways, and you know we're with you. And I'll be around this week if you want to chat. Just like that, I'll be around. Is she in town or where does she live?
She lives in the marina.
Oh,
Jewish Home for the Aged there.
oh, nice. Lovely place. El Na Rafan Allah. We ask God to send healing to her. What is her name?
Debbie Falcon.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, any other checking in, please? Any other checking in? Okay, that's great. Calendar. Oh, I have an entry on calendar. What do I have here? Oh, please listen attentively. That's a hard request to make on a Saturday morning, but it's okay because Kevin has his French ground, his coffee, and I don't. Risa and I, listening carefully, will be leaving for Israel on October 26th. October 26th. We will be returning November 16th. So October 26th, returning November 16th. We will be away for 3 Shabbatot, 3 Saturdays, Sabbaths, whatever. I am happy, but not too happy because I'm a little jealous. I'm happy to say that Rabbi Anthony Fratello, Tony Fratello, who has been with this group, well, I guess maybe 4 summers, doing teaching, that Anthony is going to be covering all 3 sessions. Okay, so you'll have a teacher almost all of you are familiar with, comfortable with, and unfortunately whom you like. So I wanted you to be aware, October 26th, November 16th, and Rabbi Anthony Fratello will be present, okay? So I'll mention again next week. Next week will be the last week, assuming that Israel doesn't close down again, as it does periodically. Fine. October 23rd, I have down Jim Ruxin and Monster Ball, or Jim.
Monster Calls.
That's the Halle Berry movie that's quite good. This is A Monster Calls.
Well, I knew that it was.
Okay, it was a nice introduction. It's a beautiful film, very sensitive, about a young boy who's grieving for his very ill mother. And either he or the cosmos creates a monster who's not a monster at all. It's a tree that transforms himself into a very loving adult presence in the boy's life. For any of us who've had a child or grandchild who can't get past certain obstacles and you try and reason with them, this film will resonate because the monster, voiced by Liam Neeson, in the most lovingly pressuring way, it's just irresistible, guides the boy through his this period of time with his mother. And it's just lovely. The resolution is very positive and uplifting. It's a beautiful film. The special effects of the transformation from the tree into the creature who nurtures the boy, they're just beautiful. Music's great. For those of you who've seen the movie The Impossibles, about the tidal wave that separates the family, it's directed by a man named B.J. Bayona, a Spaniard. Very sensitive film. And just to hear Liam Neeson's voice alone comforting the boy and guiding him is worth the time you'll spend on it. So that's next Saturday at 7:30. And then the following Wednesday on the 27th, we have Professor Jonathan Sarna will be with us to discuss a film called Jewish Soldiers in Blue and Gray, about Jewish families on opposite sides of the Civil War. It's an amazing history lesson in Jewish American history. Lots to discuss and think about there. Very relevant today. So I hope you can make that. That's a Wednesday night, Marina. You promised to be there. Okay. And that's at 7 p.m., not 7:30.
May I say that I saw that movie, Monster Calls, and it's amazing.
Please, Lady Donna, we ask that we control the number of times one speaks during the hour, just to help us that way. That would be great. Jim,
thank you.
I'd like to thank you for scheduling Jonathan Sarna the day after we leave. I think that's really thoughtful of you. Jonathan is one of the giants, or maybe the giant of American Jewish history. He is astonishing. Okay, so good stuff coming up. Any other? Okay, yes, please. Diane.
This might be not the correct time to mention it, but Jim is our expert with theater. I was told to watch the Squid Game. I have nightmares. It is so horrible. And the kids are watching it. The second scene starts with a coffin being put into an oven.
I
And
know.
I thought, oh my God, the kids are seeing this. That brought up the Holocaust to me. I said, this is awful, awful. Why do we allow that?
We're not going to do movie reviews, except that I should acknowledge that Risa and I are going to be seeing number 4 in the show, and it is horrible. Risa crawls under pillows, and we are loving it. So,
Good medicine.
Squid Games. The New York Times yesterday had a recipe for one of the things that was used in the show. I mean, it's the biggest thing on television. And Diane, the world is divided up between those who abhor it and those who are drawn to it.
But I have nightmares about putting the coffins in the oven. I see it over and over and over again. How can they do that to the kids?
It didn't pay off in the episode. There's no reference to it in episode 2. Maybe it comes up, but it's
9:15, Rabbi.
Yes, okay. We are in Genesis chapter 16, verse 1. Genesis 16, verse 1. In the Plout 99, in the WRJ 70. And here we go. Here we go. We're talking now about Abram and Sarai and the establishment of the Jewish future. And here we go. So 16 verse 1. We're going to read it. And there is so much here. Now, Abram's wife Sarai, you remember, right? Abram later becomes Abraham. Sarai is Sarai, later becomes Sarah. At this point, they're Abram and Sarai. Now, Abram's wife Sarai, who had not borne him a child, had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Start with that. What do we see? What comes out of this verse? What are the social implications of the verse? Abram's wife, not born a child, had a slave. Thoughts? Okay, Kevin.
Well, why do they have to qualify it as an Egyptian slave or an Egyptian maidservant as opposed to just a maidservant?
You and Rashi agree with the question, and Rashi says it is to point out that Hagar was the daughter of Pharaoh. Kevin, there's
so a daughter is a slave? Daughter of Pharaoh is a slave.
There is no place in the Torah that indicates that Hagar is the daughter of Pharaoh. That's Rashi. He takes your question and says, obviously, if the text said of an Egyptian, there's a reason. She's got to be the daughter of Pharaoh. Okay? And there is no other way to do. Penina.
I don't think that the chapter stands alone. It's a continuation of this event when Abraham asks Sarah to go down to Egypt and tell the king that she's his sister instead of his wife. And then Pharaoh took her. So the story of Hagar and Sarah is not a standalone story. It's connected to this. And if Abraham wouldn't have told her to go down to Egypt and save him from this war that he thought that the Pharaoh will take him as a whatever, she wouldn't have had Hagar. So we have to actually look at that story not as a standalone
long story. Now, there is no word in the early part of the story that Abram and Sarai went out of Egypt with slaves. Rashi weaves it together, and for him it works. There's another reason. Because Hagar will become the mother of Ishmael and a great nation. If that's going to happen, they're going to elevate the status of Hagar. They're going to make her someone special. That's good. Okay, what else do we know in here? What else stares at us? Hi, Fern. What else stares at us? There are slaves. The Israelites had slaves. Slavery is a permitted phenomenon within the Torah. We can't get out of that. You can give me all kinds of ways in which the Torah protects the rights and the humanity and the needs, the concerns of a slave. Yes, but Torah permits slavery. Later, Jewish tradition will forbid slavery. But that is not Torah. And I would like to say to all of you who are members of Reform congregations that Isaac Mayer Wise, the beloved saintly founder of American Reform institutions, like the Hebrew Union College, like the Union of Reformed Judaism, like the Central Conference of American Rabbis, that Isaac Mayer Wise lived in Cincinnati during the Civil War and did not side with the North. So there, Steve.
Two things. First of all, when you say it allows slavery, that's different than dictating slavery and rather could just be an acknowledgement of the world at the time. And secondly, most of the slaves and the rules are not truly slaves. They're indentured servants who, after a certain amount of time, get their freedom.
There are two
which is
kinds of-
different than property.
There are two different kinds of slaves. One is, if you will, Jewish Israelite slaves, and one is non-Jewish. The Jewish slaves are very much like indentured servants. They are and they have to be released after the 7th year, and they have to be fed with the family. There are all kinds of rules and regulations. Those regulations do not apply equally to non-Israelite slaves. So there is slavery, right? And indentured servitude, both. There is both. So we have that. We can't escape from the fact that the South used Torah quotes to justify the persistence of slavery. They did. That is not a happy thought. It is just there. Okay, there we go. Abram's up. Okay. Now, last point. What else do we see? One other small matter here. Whose fault is it that Abram and Sarai do not have children? Yeah.
May I speak?
I said Sarai, except she's muted, but I read your lips, so be very careful. Yes, it's Sarai's fault. Sarai's fault. And then later, we're going to move it one step up. It won't be Sarai's fault. It will be God's fault. So by the time we're done with this chapter, infertility is an act which reflects the will of God. And this is on Rosh Hashanah, the assigned haftarah is to read about Hannah and the birth of Samuel. If you remember, and by the way, that reading is almost universally not read in Reform congregations. The reason is that the whole setup of the story is Hannah couldn't bear children because God didn't want her to. Eventually, she cries out to God and he listens to her. So what we have is a built-in statement that infertility is the product of divine will. And the Reform movement, therefore, sidelined this passage, removed it from the High Holiday liturgy, and replaced it. Penina.
There is a pattern in the Bible and in the whole story, all the stories, that before there is a change in history and a great personality is about to be born, that the mother was barren. You can see the pattern all through the stories. You go from Sarah giving birth to Yitzhak, and then you have Agar giving birth to Ishmael. And then we have it all even before Samson was born, because there was about to be a change in history. The era of the judges would be gone, and then monarchy will start. So you see also change in history when even Moses, his mother wasn't barren, but the daughter of Pharaoh was barren, so she took him. So there is a pattern. Samuel also, when he was born, he's the one who eventually going to make the king, make King David a king. And there was a change in history. Samson was a horrible person. But yet his mother was barren before he was born. Change in history from judges to monarchy. So we have to look at that at a pattern.
Okay, Penina.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
So we have one sentence, one verse, and there's a lot in there, some of which is troubling, some of which is just fact. Then Sarai said to Abram, listen to this, seeing as the Eternal has kept me from bearing a child, have intercourse with my slave, maybe I will have a son through her. I'll take your comments first and then throw in a few of mine. Jim?
I was concerned because I read ahead and sorry. Abraham takes her up on the offer, and when Hagar gets pregnant, Sarai turns against her and says, it's, your fault, where it contradicts what she said, he'll have a son through me, as though it were selfless. Can you explain that?
I am going to be so careful. I could be guilty of a response right now, which would probably lead to a divorce. So I'm not, not going to respond, but I will say that the rabbis looked at this and they were very troubled, Jim, just the way you are. They see it, it's clear, it's a problem.
I could explain it with human nature by saying, when her wish came through, she got jealous because it wasn't her child. It's one step removed from Sarai, and it may bind Abram to Hagar more than to her.
It's going to go on that way. And by the way, in the Quran, it absolutely does. Remember that the same story with small differences appears in the Quran, and eventually in the Quran, Abram, and Ishmael bond very closely. And there is even a story within the Quran that Abraham and Ishmael go to Mecca together, and they go to the Kaaba together, and that Abraham helped Ishmael get the Muslim tradition going. So it's the same story written with a few minor differences, and what you said happens. What you said happens. It goes even further because in the Quran, guess who undergoes the Akedah? Ishmael, not Isaac. Not Isaac. Ishmael is almost sacrificed by his loving father. So either Abraham is a serial killer, or the story is by the way, please, this is being recorded. Forget that I said that. It couldn't possibly be. But in any event, Abarbanel, one of the great commentators, says, Sarai said to herself from the beginning, Abarbanel, he wrote this, he says, Sarah said, I am introducing trouble into my house, but this is the better way. So Sarai knew that, according to Barbanel, knew that her action bringing Hagar in is very problematic, but she said to herself, my husband needs a male heir. God won't let me do it. I'm going to give him Hagar. But the story is going to go on. Abarbanel says, I still don't understand why Sarai then turned around and kicked Hagar out. So Jim, you and Abarbanel both have the same question, and it's a great question. How did it happen? And Sarai is believed to believe Abraham's seed, his seed, is sacred. So the people will inherit the land, must bear his seed. Now the question is, with Sarai or with Hagar? Is the identity of the mother of significance the way the identity of the father? Yes, I see Lisa Beth.
So,
Hi,
I mean,
Lisa Beth.
hi, I have my video off because I'm doing something distracting. So with regard to Hagar, honestly, my brain goes to like, did he rape her, or did, because was she a willing participant saying like, oh, great, I get to have intercourse with this random master guy.
This dude, yes. There is, to my knowledge, no rabbinic comment that in any way this was a forced thing. On the other hand, Hagar was property.
Mm-hmm.
She was property. Would you, Lisa Beth, would you like to use my car today? It's oh, Abram, would you like to use my slave today? Forgive the rudeness of the comparison, but it's property. So now it's interesting, for example, the Sarai says to Abram, God has stopped me from giving birth. Bo na el shifchati, come to my shifcha. Come. Now, bo has two very distinct meanings in Hebrew. And when you speak Hebrew, you got to be careful. Bo, lavo, is to come. Bowie. You say to a little kid, Bowie, come here, Bowie, come here, right? But bo also means have intercourse. And you do need to be careful how you use those verbs. Otherwise, you could go to jail. Now, so there are translations, and some of you, Effie, some of you may have it, come to Hagar, but bo means have intercourse, sleep with Hagar. So that is clear. Have intercourse with. Now, and Tamara, I'm going to ask for your guidance on this. Hagar in the Hebrew is referred to as shifcha. In the old days, shifcha used to mean maidservant. It's not the word eved, which could more normally be translated as slave. Is shifcha easily also slave? Or what's with the, because again, I normally translate it as maidservant.
Yeah, I think it's not completely consistent, but by and large, shifcha is a slave woman, similar to eved. But eved can be used as like I'm at your service. Somebody
of title may use that. Chevra is not used that way. The word ama, which also appears in our story when next week's parasha, when Sarah says, kick out the ama. Ama is the forearm. Ama is also a measure, like our feet is a measure. And ama means a handmaid, someone who is an extension of me. And it is used like eved as an honorific term, not as a low-level slave. So Chevra is a slave. And I want to add that we forget that in the ancient world, surrogacy through slaves was a very common thing. That's why I don't think the word rape would come up, because if you were a Chevra, there was no limit to how your role will be defined. And at the same time, there were very many rules spelling out how you do surrogacy. And in terms, what happens if the slave person is uppity, there are rules. And we have hundreds of documents from 3,400 years ago showing how this was regulated. And the story of Abraham and Sarah seems to fit consistently within the norms.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so my Chevra being maidservant only is not unusual, wrong. And fine. Okay, I will.
No, I'm sorry. Do you distinguish maid service from slave?
I feel that I'm being pilloried here.
Well, if you are,
I would have. Yes, I would have. Maidservant.
I would say Chevra is both. She's both. She's there to do whatever is needed doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi, may I ask you a question?
Oh, we're here. Who?
Donna, may I ask you a question? I was listening yesterday with Rabbi Nana talking about the same subject with Sarai and Abraham. When she went to Egypt, she was called woman. No longer Sarah means princess. When she was in Egypt with the Pharaoh, she was called woman. The woman that is with you. And why did you lie about her being your sister? She lost her title as a princess and became a slave.
Okay. Tamara, you're shaking your head.
No, the woman in the story was Sarai, and now the slave is Hagar, two different people.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about Sarah when she was
Okay.
given to the Pharaoh.
Okay.
She's
Now-
not a slave.
Now, we have additional problems with this, and Barbanel pursues a whole bunch of things. After a little while, Hagar is going to get a communication from God. And how does that happen? How does an Egyptian end up being a prophet or speak with angels? This is a problem the rabbis confront, and they're going to have to make. Look, the reason Hagar is so problematic is because the rabbis lived, let's say, 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd, 4th, 5th century after the Common Era, when by the time we get to the 7th century, we have a Muslim empire. And therefore, they have to deal with the reality that A, they're living in a Muslim world to a large extent, and B, how do you explain the great power of Islam and the, shall we say, lesser power of the Jewish people? And there are going to be some interesting statements. Penina.
Okay. During the Inquisition, the Jews were under stress wherever it is that the Inquisition was in power. So in Spain, there was a war between Islam and Christianity. They were fighting, literally wars, and the Jews followed the Muslims. for shelter. And if Spain was, the North was under the Muslim government or whatever, conquerors, the Jews moved up to where they were. If it changed hand, they moved again.
Okay,
The
well,
Inquisition.
we're not going to do Spanish Jewish history. Everything you
No,
said.
but what I'm trying to tell you is that they followed wherever Islam was. They felt safer under the Islamic regime. That's it.
Okay, now, Sarai says to Abram, God has messed me up here. Sleep with my slave. Maybe I will have a son through her. Ulai ibaneh. I like that word. I like the word ibaneh. I do have strange likes. I like Squid Game, strange likes. Ibaneh. I'd like to point out that that is a full-scale Hebrew pun. Okay? A full-scale Hebrew pun. And it's kind of interesting to bump into it. What's the Hebrew word for a son? S-O-N. Ben. Ben. The Hebrew for build is boneh. Bet nun hey. The Hebrew for son, S-O-N, is ben. The Hebrew in the text says, Ulai ibaneh mimenu. Maybe I will be built up through her by my having a ben. Ibaneh, I'll be built with a ben. And that may not be exciting to you, but I spent time just laughing at it, and I was very happy. Ibaneh, a wonderful, wonderful word in which the author played with the Hebrew language. Right here, the author said, "Ooh, I can write this word, and it means both, and they're really the same." So forgive me. I like these little things. This was fun. So maybe come now to my Chevra, which now I am clearly calling a slave. Perhaps I will be built up by having a son from her. Vayishma Avram L'kol Sarai. Now, in terms of marriage counseling, which, by the way, over the years, I did a lot of marriage counseling, and I have a success rate. It's got to be over 10%. But this phrase, Abram listened to the voice of Sarai.
He didn't need much encouragement.
In terms, ladies and gentlemen, of trying to forge a happy marriage, Vayishma Avraham L'kol Sarai, that's a recommended approach, okay? And we'll just leave it like that. And of course, we should say, and the husband should listen to the wife, and the wife should listen to the husband. But good old Abram, he did that. He did that. Now, Abram listened to his wife. There's a little bit of medicine thrown into this from the commentator Sforno. Sforno said, Sarai might have had an ulterior motive. This is reproductive health. When she wondered that if she saw Hagar being pregnant from Abram, maybe they didn't have the word hormones, would kick in and she could conceive. I mean, she didn't have the word hormone, but Sforno said, actually, Sarai gave Hagar to Abram, knowing that there would be problems, but hoping that, you know what? If that woman gets pregnant from that man, maybe my pregnancy juices will kick in. So that's Forno's contribution to reproductive health. Not quite sure how that goes. Okay, so Abram listens to his wife. Wait. What is his wife able to do? What is Sarai doing for Abram and Abram's future? What is really going to happen here?
He needs an heir.
He needs an heir. Okay, yes. Okay, Kevin.
Okay, so the story of taking Ishmael up and using him as a sacrifice makes more sense, because he's the older son, and to make amends with Sarah and have everything go to the younger son. I mean, that just makes a little bit more sense. If that does make sense, why would the Jewish people take over the story with Isaac? I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry to bring that question.
You have penetrated a great question. No, don't be sorry. Let's give an example, Kevin. We have 12 tribes, right? We have 12 tribes. And we have Sarah, Rivka, we have Rachel and Leah as the mothers of all 12 sons, right? No. Some of the maidservants, the women in the family, not Rachel and Leah, also had sons, and they ended up as legitimate as the sons of Rachel and Rivka. Rachel and Leah. Think about that. In the story of Jacob and his 4, we call them wives, but 2 were wives and 2 were the associate wives or whatever. Yet their children get counted into the founding mix of the 12 tribes. Each of the sons, the 2 associate wives, the 2 real wives, their sons are equal. And now you have an associate wife here, and her son will not be equal in Jewish terms. You're totally...
But equal, it's the older son. Doesn't the oldest, is he the oldest son, or he's not the oldest son?
Okay, and there you have a problem everywhere in Genesis. Kevin, you're hitting, I think the Dodgers could use you right now. The elder son in Genesis doesn't make out well. Okay? The elder son gets messed up in the line of inheritance. Should Isaac have inherited? Should Jacob have inherited?
You got to move your hands.
Mara and Cindy. Mara.
I have a question that I maybe connects to this and goes back to the discussion we were having on servitude and slavery.
Yeah.
In verse 1, Sarah is referred to as Sarai, Abram's wife. And then in verse 3, Sarai, Abram's wife, Avram's wife. It's the only place in the chapter that she's referred to in that way. And for me, it creates a kind of equality between Sarai and Hagar. They're both property of Avram's. And therefore, what you were just talking about as far as the children all being whether children of Abraham or Isaac or Jacob being of Jewish mother or not Jewish mother, that it kind of it kind of matches that erasure of difference.
Okay, first of all, I'm not going to go with the separation Jewish and non-Jewish. I think the issue of status, which you point out, is much more important. The officially married wife, the adjacent. I like the word adjacent. Someone, when we first moved to Los Angeles, I said to someone, "Where do you live?" "We live adjacent Beverly Hills." What a funny thing. Okay, so anyway, adjacent. So the difference is not their ethnic origin. The difference is their status in the relationship. Okay, Sarai is much more than property in the story, much more. She is in many ways a partner, and she gets away with rebuking Abram and straightening him out and doing what has to be done. When Ishmael is regarded as harassing Isaac, Sarah then goes to Abraham and says, "Kick that woman and her kid out," and Abraham does it. It's the rabbis like partnership between Sarai, Sarah, and Abraham. Okay, they're not, in other words, Sarai is not of the same status as Hagar. Okay, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Do the rabbis comment on the fact that she is referred to as Sarai, Avram's wife, only in those two places?
Not to my knowledge, but I would say to you, Omara, that they're drawing a line between Sarai and Hagar. This one's the wife, and this is the not wife. Okay, I see Brad.
I think
Panina. Brad, Steve, Panina.
I think Steve was first.
Okay, Steve.
What makes someone an official wife? I thought that once Abram slept with a woman who wasn't married, she became a wife.
All that I know, and I'm not an expert at all in ancient Middle East marriage requirements, but we have to be careful not to retroject into the past that which the rabbis then develop. The rabbis develop a system in which bia, intercourse, is one way to marry. Okay? But that's much, much, much later than our story. And Tamara, I don't mean to bother you a lot, but I'm a little bit insecure. This is what I think is true, that there is taking someone to be a wife is more than just an act of intercourse in those days. Okay? Yeah, so I think that is correct, Steve. I think later on, bia is one of the three ways in which one can, forgive the male orientation, acquire a wife. Okay? You can do it through a document, a shtar, which means a ketubah. You can give money, or you can have intercourse. Three ways in which you can become officially married. That's rabbinic. That's not Torah. Okay, Brad.
Well, I just was thinking about what Mara had said about Sarai and Hagar being property. And the distinction there is that, in my mind, is that Sarai has agency, which Hagar does not. And the reason we know that is that Sarai gives Hagar to Abraham. That's what we're told in verse 3, it is. And in other words, she's entering into a gift exchange with her husband. And what she's expecting is him to reciprocate. And as a result, because he hasn't entered properly into the gift exchange, she's angry with him. Her anger is directed towards Abraham.
That's a lovely insight. That's a lovely insight. That, you know, to treat it as I gifted you, what am I getting back? Aggravation. Okay. Yes, Brad, thank you. Good. I'm going to Penina, then Kevin.
Okay. I think the location also had something to do with it. Hagar went back to her people, which were down south. She settled in Beersheba. When Sarah left Abraham and went to Chevron, because she had her own tent and her own domain, that's why she was called Sarai. She was a princess in his own right. She went back to, she left him, she went to another place. Abraham went to live with Hagar in Beersheba, in the desert. So I think later on when Yitzchak and when Abraham dies, Yitzchak and Ishmael are going together to get his bones and bury him. So there is a unity there, and I think it's a matter of territory. Hagar went back to her people. She wasn't one of the Hebrews. Yitzchak continued wherever it is the domain of Abraham was, and Sarah. So I think they also, there was a togetherness there. It was a choice of geography that happened there. Ishmael wasn't interested in even partnering or taking over Yitzchak territory. Everybody had his own domain, and this is where the nation bloomed and prospered or whatever.
Okay, it's always interesting. You know, this is being written by Isaac's descendants, if you will. So it reads like, you know, people exercise preferences and Isaac did the right choice, but then again, we are Isaac's descendants. And you know, they're not free from a little prejudice. Did I call a name because I want to move on, Kevin? And then I just have an interesting last thing to throw.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that this story was written by a man, meaning when Sarah gave Hagar as a gift, is it with a willing gift, or is it the man saying, you know, yes, she said, you know, go sleep with anyone you want. So, you know, I did. You know, so it was it willing by Sarah, or is that just how they wrote it and she wasn't willing to do that?
Super. I mean, that is a totally fair question also. And I think it goes back to the status of Sarai. And I think that she is viewed as exercising real agency, if you will, and that Sarai's offer of Hagar is Sarai telling Avram, that's the woman from whom we should try to get a kid. And okay, let me just move on. Last thought before we join in Kaddish. Verse 3, there's so much, I have read this forever and ever and don't think about it. 10 years after Abram settled in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took her slave Hagar, the Egyptian, gave her to husband Abram. Simple language, right? They were 10 years in the land, no baby. Hagar goes to Abram. And let me just give you a couple things. The rabbis insist that Hagar did not get pregnant quickly, or if she got pregnant quickly, she miscarried, and that Ishmael is the second of her children. And in this way, the rabbis were trying to put down the power of Hagar. And when I read these commentaries that there was a miscarriage, and then she became pregnant again and then bore, one of the rabbis would say, this is to make it easier for Sarai, that look, you know, it isn't 1, 2, 3. Some of the rabbis believe that Hagar got pregnant on the first night, but then she had a miscarriage. But, and there's so much here. I love it. There's so much. Last thought. Verse 3, 10 years. In Deuteronomy 24, 1-4, you have the only grounds for divorce in the Torah. The rabbis take that passage and extrapolate and explain that if a woman fails to have a child after 10 years, that is grounds for divorce. There are other grounds for divorce which I find much more attractive. For example, if she burns his dinner. I found that much easier. You understand that I would never say this were Risa sitting here. Now,
Careful, she's walking behind
the
you.
rabbis took their understanding of the grounds of divorce and said, you know what's going on here? And this is not possible, but do you know what's going on here? Sarai realized that she was on verge of being kicked out by Abram. So she quickly, at the end of the 10 years, brought in Hagar and did it to save her marriage. This is just another case of, please don't give me chronology, don't give me history, give me a good story. And that's what they did. Wow. There's so much more here. We're gonna stop. Rashi accused Hagar of saying I love this, said the following. Ha, said she, after she got pregnant following the first night. That Sarai isn't all that righteous. She couldn't get pregnant and I could. And it was really on that basis that everything turns around. There's too much. I gotta stop. We'll come back to it next year and we'll do some more. And Barbara, it is so good to see you. Always good to see you. And that's fantastic. We are going, Karen, I am going to be reading the Kaddish list. I am going to be mentioning your mother's name, but on behalf of all of us, we send you our shared concern and love. Hashem Yenachem Otach, may God grant you consolation for your loss. We read the names of those who have passed away during the past month. Frank Barnes, Mona Brandler, Sandy Chatkin, June Clayman, Ruth Davidson, John McNichol, Howard Flug, Michael Plattis, Michael Ravkin, Deborah Regal, Miriam Sarachik, Ron Solomons, Ronnie Stabler, Stephen Weiner, Deborah Werner. Yard sites that occurred during the past week: Saul Arno, Melvin Berlant, Laura Boasberg, Henrietta Breitbart, Miriam Brine, Joseph Broido, William Renee Brown, William Burns, Sylvia Coe, Herbert Eisenstadt, Nathan Farber, Marjorie Feinberg, Elaine Fisher, Shirley Fleischman, Dorothy Tifford Foreman, Albert Franco, Vida Franco, Sidel Freeman, William Gantz, Edna Glickman, Melissa Goldberg, Jack Green, Bunny Grossman, William Gruber, Herbert Hamrell, Ruth Hoffenberg, Ann Jacobs, Benjamin Kaplan, Faye Kaplan, Arlene Katzman, Samuel Klein, Cecilia Lawson, Harold Leventhal, Sophia Lever, Dorothy Levine, Joseph Levy, Rosalie Lewis, Barry Lip, Ida Lippy, Ted Lunine, Stanley Masry, Edwin Mizell, Babette Milner, Margaret Nussbacher, Ira Petowitz, Betty Pollock, Alan Martin Pullman, Sophia Ratner, Aaron Reifman, Max Rice, Joan Richards, Charles Rose, Dorothy Rose, Nathan Rubin, Louise Rovelson, Stuart Sachs, Louis Sallet, Sidney Wayne Saltzman, Lisa Schiller, Elaine Schlossman, Jacob Schneider, Richard Schumann, Raymond Schuwager, Raymond Schwartz, Muriel Shields, Rebecca Smith, James Spector, Eugene David Spurtis, Bunny Sreer, Joseph Stamler, Jack Stearns, Maureen Stein, Kenneth Stein, Annalie Gordon Watt, Milton Wintrub. If you have other names that you would like to have included at this time, you can speak those names aloud or in your own heart. We add as well the names of all of those who died defending the state of Israel and those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. And again, I apologize for names that have been mispronounced. May all of our loved ones be remembered for blessing. You may stand in your place or remain seated. We join in Kaddish. Yitgadal, V'yitkadash, B'mei Rabbah, V'alma Divra Chirutei, Yamlit Malchutei, Machayecho V'yomechon, V'chaye V'lo Beit Yisrael, V'agala V'zman Kariv. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei Rabba Barach, V'alam Le'omei Almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudishah, V'ritu, Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbachata v'nechamata, Ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Amen. May God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace in our hearts, make peace in our homes, make peace in the household of Israel, make peace among all the families and nations of earth, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. You can put me in your back pocket to go to Israel.
Okay, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, lahavdil, to take a moment break, I am happy to announce that late Rabbi Morley Feinstein a grandson was born to his family.
Oh,
And so
Marco.
there is that joy. And, you know, if you'd send a note to Margaret or, you know, whatever you would choose to do, that would be a blessing. And Karen, we send you our love. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom, everybody.
God shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.